Hi guys, my name's Mike and welcome to this first video in the beginner's quick start guide to playing guitar. In this lesson I'm going to show you 5 must-know beginner guitar chords, and along the way I'm going to give you some tips on how to make them sound nice and clear and also how to remember them. So let's get to a close-up and let's get started. So to play this E chord, first of all we need to place our thumb behind the neck. Okay, so place your thumb behind the neck. Next, we're going to put our fingers into position one at a time, and we're going to use the tips of our fingers to hold down the strings behind the frets. So let's go ahead and get them into position. So, starting with your first finger, we're going to place it at the first fret on the G string. So your first finger at the first fret on the G string. Next, your second finger at the second fret on the A string. And then your third finger at the second fret on the D string. Okay, and you can play all the strings for this chord. Now what you don't want to do is have your fingers flat like this, because you end up with a horrible sound just like that, and that's not what we want at all. So if you think of your fingers as being claws, so if you give them like a claw shape when they're on the fretboard, it will stop you from blocking these strings down here, and you'll get a nice clear sound. So that sounds about right to me at the moment. And just to check to make sure that each string is ringing out nice and clear, just play the strings one at a time. So now let's have a look at the A chord, and again we're going to get our fingers into position one at a time, starting with our first finger, which we need to place at the second fret on the G string. Okay, now I'm going to place it just here, so I'm not going to be right behind the fret, I need to place it back here, and you will see why I need to do that in just a moment. So your first finger at the second fret on the G string, but not right up to the fret, keep it back here. Now, if you get your second finger and place it at the second fret on the D string, which is just here, okay, so your second finger at the second fret on the D string, and now your third finger on the second fret on the B string, okay, so your third finger at the second fret on the B string, and as you can see I needed to place my first finger back here to fit in these next two fingers right behind the fret, because if I had my first finger right up here I wouldn't be able to get those two fingers right behind the fret. Okay, so with this chord you don't play the low E string, you miss out the thickest string, and you just play the top 5 strings. And again, just pick out the strings one at a time to make sure they're all ringing out nice and clear. And now moving on to the D chord. So first of all, take your first finger and place it at the second fret on the G string. So your first finger at the second fret on the G string. Then place your second finger at the second fret on the E string, the high E string, which is the thinnest string. Then place your third finger at the third fret on the B string. Okay, so your third finger at the third fret on the B string. Now for this chord, you don't play the low E string or the A string, okay? So you just play the top 4 strings. And again, just play each string by itself just to make sure each note is ringing out nice and clear. So these next two chords we're going to be looking at are going to be C and G. Now these are going to be a little bit more of a stretch than the ones we've just looked at, so just remember the 3 key points: keeping your thumb behind the neck, using your fingertips to hold down the strings, and keep your fingers like claws to make sure you're not blocking any of the other strings. So let's have a look at these last 2 chords. And now let's look at the C chord. So first of all, if you place your first finger at the first fret on the B string, so your first finger at the first fret on the B string, then place your second finger at the second fret on the D string, so your second finger at the second fret on the D string, and finally your third finger at the third fret on the A string. Now for this chord, you only play the top 5 strings, so you don't play the lowest E string, the thickest string, just the top 5. And again, to make sure each string is ringing out nice and clear, just play the strings one at a time. Now, to help you remember all these chords, here's a little exercise that works pretty well. If you place your fingers into position for the chord you're trying to learn, just hold it there for a couple of seconds and then take your fingers off, shake your fingers out, and then place them back on in position again. Just keep them there for a few seconds and then take them off, shake your fingers out and place them back on. And if you do this, say 10 or 15 times, a couple of times a day, eventually muscle memory will kick in and you'll be able to get your fingers into position a lot easier, and you'll start to remember each chord shape. Okay, so finally let's have a look at the G chord. So starting again with our first finger, we're going to place it at the second fret on the A string. So place your first finger at the second fret on the A string. Then place your second finger at the third fret on the low E string, the thickest string. So your second finger at the third fret on the thickest E string. And finally place your third finger on the thinnest E string, the high E string, at the third fret. So your third finger at the third fret on the high E string. Now for this chord, you can play all of the strings. Now for this chord, you can actually play it another way, and it's still the same chord, it's just a slightly different way of playing it. Firstly, if you take your third finger and just move it up a string, so it's still on the third fret, but it's now on the B string, so your third finger is now at the third fret on the B string, and then place your little finger just below it on the high E string at the third fret. So your little finger is now at the third fret on the high E string, and then you place your first finger at the second fret on the A string just like before, and your second finger at the third fret on the low E string, like this. And again, you can play all the strings. And again, just make sure that each string is ringing out nice and clear. So there's 5 chords for you to get started on. For more free online lessons, check out my site mikeguitarlessons.com, and in the next video we shall be having a look at how to change from one chord to another. So until then, take care, bye for now.